2024, much like 2023, wasn't an especially good year for video games, unless you're looking at a list of the games released, in which case, as usual, it was excellent. 2024 more than ever was buffered by innovative titles developed by independent creators and smaller teams. Everything else was terrible. I don't have the bandwidth to go over every major layoff that occurred in 2024, like I did within 2023, but according to this site that I've linked in the description, there were about 14,000 positions lost during the past year. That's 50% more than were lost in 2023. Thousands and thousands of people who suddenly lost their ability to put food on the table, to keep their homes warm, to keep their homes at all. Not only is it bad for those going through this horrible shift, but it's also bad for the industry. The studios remaining won't be able to be as creative or flexible or fast. The knowledge and experience lost likely cannot be recovered. My heart goes out to everyone affected. I hope everyone is or was able to land on their feet before too long. The few months between 2023 and 2024 I spent unemployed were some of the most stressful months of my life, and I had it relatively easy. I don't wish that on a single soul. And on top of that, 2024 was a bad year for the world. A genocide in Palestine has waged for the entire year, fully supported by my cruel government. Said government that is now to be led by the even crueler side of the imperial coin that is the USA's two-party system. I do not know what is going to happen to all the trans individuals out there. I do not know what is going to happen to the Hispanic population, migrant or not, but I am scared. And all the while, the world burns. It burns for oil executives, government officials, tech billionaires, useless large language models. Anyway, video games. According to my backlogged list, I've put time into 26 video games in the year of our Lord 2024. Although only a fraction are games I've played for the first time. Even less were released during 2024. As such, I don't feel fully confident making a proper top 10, so this year's video will be in two parts. A list of games I felt mention worthy, and my top 5 games I played, regardless of release year. Speaking of backlogged, you can check out either that or my ggap.io account to see a slightly different top 10, but let's focus on that later. For now, let's move on to my honorable mentions. I only played Hades 2 for a couple hours, despite having purchased the title day one, despite the multiple fairly large patches having dropped since. It's not because I disliked the game, rather the opposite. I cannot wait to dig in for dozens of hours when it's fully complete. A couple years back, I realized I had never played the Shovel Knight DLCs, so every few months I'd plug in my PS Vita to try out the next. At the start of 2024, I finally got to the last of them. King of Cards is a fantastic little game, although I never really got good at the card portion, and Spectre of Torment is likely the best of the 3 expansions, but I can now say that I'm one of the very few people who have fully completed the entirety of Shovel Knight Treasure Trove. Easily one of the best to have ever done it. I tried jumping back into The Binding of Isaac after completing Shovel Knight, only to find the Vita version had become nigh unplayable. Could I have put in my Switch copy? Yeah, sure. But instead, I repurchased the game for the PS4 so I could continue collecting those delicious trophies on my PS5, And it's still Isaac. It's still one of my most favorite games ever. Can you believe I put 114 hours into it? That's what unemployment does to you, huh? As a Star Wars fan, Friends at the Table fan, former Waypoint fan, and current Remap fan, I, of course, am a More Civilized Age fan as well. During the actors and writers strike a while back, they took a break from watching Star Wars Rebels to play through Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. While initially excited to see what this oft-spoken-of title was, my opinion of it isn't quite so high. It's always very Star Wars, and that was great. But the level of interaction I had over the narrative left me wanting, and I chafed against the battle system quite badly. I'd much rather it have been either a proper third-person action game or have had a more traditional turn-based battle system. And as a person who landed on more of a support build while my partners did heavy damage, the final area, and especially the final boss, left me with a sour taste. I've calmed on it since, appreciating the package as a whole, but gosh dang it, I wish I liked it more. Maybe KotOR 2 though. Anyway, here is my Malik Lego minifig because I'm a broken individual. I bought the Lego set for the minifig. Hatsune Miku is basically the only person who can get me to regularly exercise, and she's been doing a pretty good job at it. Is fitness boxing a good game? Maybe not so much, but it's good that it's gotten me active, at least a little, and Miku is very impressed with me every time I play, and she's very cute. Alright, that's good. My prevailing thought during Echoes of Wisdom was, wow, they made a Zelda game inspired by Breath of the Wild. Which is to say, it was cool that the game would let me go pretty much anywhere as long as I could stack enough boxes and trampolines, but the formula itself became pretty rote. Go to an area, solve a side quest or two, clean up the rift, do that 6 more times. The worst part for me was the quest writing. I don't necessarily need all my Zelda games to have majestic prose, but too many of the storylines felt right out of a Disney Channel cartoon. It wasn't anything deeper than I'd find in a Phineas and Ferb episode, and it made the whole story feel far too simple. 2024 was a big year for RPGs. Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, Dragon's Dogma 2, Persona 3, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Dragon Age Veilguard, Metaphor ReFantasio. I did not play any of those. No, I jumped into Mario and Luigi Brothership. I'm a big fan of the formula. The battle system avoiding and countering attacks with each brother works so well for me. This time around it's been updated in both ways I like and dislike. Regular jumps involving both bros? Good. Plug system? Mixed bag. Not being able to properly control Luigi? Felt wrong. The game's score was good, but never reached the highs that most of the other games reached. My biggest grievance is how long it takes to beat. There's a truly fantastic 30 hours of adventure in here, but the extra 20 made it bloated. There's a few too many islands, too much backtracking, too many rote side quests. When it's good, it's great, but there can be too much of a good thing. But that is enough of the honorables. Let's have a look at my top 5. When I reviewed Splatoon 3's single-player campaign, link to that in the description, I mentioned how I really only ever played the multiplayer mode during Splatfests. Well, that changed. See, I also got my sister the game. I'd assumed that, like many others, she'd played for a bit, then fall off. That did not happen. She has played Splatoon 3 for hundreds of hours, maybe even over 1,000 at this point, and most of that is in multiplayer. So of course, I started playing more too. At first, just to play with her. Then, when she flaunted her maxed out catalog, well then I had to max mine out too, darn it. Which had me getting my daily dubs, well, almost daily. And then Side Order came out, then the Grand Fest, then primary support on Splatoon 3 ended. I was horribly sick during the Grand Fest. It was heartbreaking. I couldn't think clearly. I was not playing well. I wanted to fully enjoy this celebration of these games. All three idol groups competing for, presumably, who'd be the main focus for Splatoon 4. I teared up watching all of them perform on stage. Hearing new performances of We're So Back and Liquid Sunshine, it got to me. It was really something special, and I feel like I missed out just a bit. My sister and I, of course, backed Team Present, Off the Hook, Pearl, and Marina, the obvious correct choice. We lost badly, but goodness gracious, it has been a blast being embedded within this game throughout the year. I've now fallen back into only playing during Splatfests, but if an old catalog I didn't max out comes back around, I might have to get more daily dubs. Oh, right, number 5 is Side Order. I really enjoyed Side Order. I've got my props, I've got my complaints, you can hear about them in my review dropping in the coming weeks. Link to that in the description, when it posts, at least. When a game is praised to all hell by seemingly everyone who has ever touched it, often that means being set up for disappointment. The game that actually exists will have a hard time competing against the idea of it, especially when it's still held as the prime example of its genre, nearly half a decade after it released. Well, I finally got around to playing Disco Elysium last year. You know, the left-leaning, wonderfully prosed, narrative bombshell CRPG from 2019 that, to this day, is still revered. I'll go into my full experience in a video in the coming weeks, link to that will be in the description after it releases, but to be blunt, my initial reaction was mixed. This being my first ever experience with a CRPG, I managed to stumble into numerous soft lock type situations. I didn't know that I should be saving more often, and I had to walk back and forth a lot to find the right dialogue choice to progress further, which isn't even to mention the couple times I straight up had to look something up. And it made it all the more frustrating because when I did have things to do, I was rewarded with some of the best prose I've ever heard in video games. The writing is superb. The way that Harry, Kim, and Harry's inner monologues communicate with the world is endlessly fascinating. The narration is gripping in its execution. The aforementioned prose is hypnotizing. The story itself is a very well-delivered mystery. The way that these characters talk about this strange, not quite Earth-like world is fascinating. I love how most everyone in the game is dealt a bad hand, but they are all still trying to continue on. It took me a while to get here. Initially, I was upset by the bad rolls, by the amount of backtracking and wondering I had to do, but over the past few months, I've grown to truly appreciate the best parts of this narrative adventure. Hopefully, when I go back for the extra trophies, I'll be able to appreciate it even more. Sony's Insomniac has become my favorite first-party Sony development studio. The first 2 Spider-Man games were solid, especially in regards to navigation. Swinging around that city feels amazing, no matter how many times I do it. Spectacular, even. Friendly neighborhood, even. No, that one doesn't. The title that really did it for me was Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. Sure, it was technically only my second Ratchet & Clank game, my first being the soft-ish reboot from a few years prior, but I absolutely loved it. Which is all to say, I also wound up really enjoying Sony's Insomniac's Marvel's Spider-Man 2. The addition of gliding really worked, making navigating this metropolis truly freeing. After playing through and completing the game once, I played through it again for the trophy, and I went and fully completed all the side quests too, mainly because of how good it felt to swing around. I can't say I'm the biggest fan of the combat. It works. The boss fights were all a drag. Sure, it was fine enough that first phase, but every single boss required me to beat it 3, sometimes 4 times. I'd beat them, then they'd refill their life bar, then I'd have to do it again. At least sometimes the boss phases would be broken up by somewhat exciting chase sequences. One of the most disappointing moments was hearing so much about the portal fight, only to realize that it was just what Rift Apart did, but not quite as good. The rest of the side activities were fine, but again, were mainly just a way for me to continue enjoying swinging around. My biggest complaint of Insomniac being locked away into this Marvel hell is that they can also make Ratchet and Clanks when they're able to, and those games are better. Which is all to say, I still really enjoy the hell out of these Spider-Man games. They could release one every other year and I'll eat them all up. Swinging around is that good. I'm somewhat of an expert when it comes to 3D platformers. Well, Super Mario 3D platformers at the very least. My time with the PS5 back in Astro's Playroom left me wanting more of this particular flavor, so I was incredibly excited for Astro Bot, and I loved it. While I don't think actually controlling Astro feels as good as controlling Mario, it's still a solid enough base, and the simple moveset is executed on perfectly with each of these immaculately designed levels. They are all so truly unique, visually interesting, and have such fun secrets to divine. And the level-specific power-ups alter it in some amazing ways. Some of the best levels are due to incredibly clever level design. Most of them involve getting really long fists, or a dash backpack, or a slow down thing, or a little shrinking mouse, power-ups that alter the game immaculately. My only real complaint is that it feels like Astro didn't have room to be characterized. He's cute enough, but the world still feels so generic, and any space that could have made it interesting was instead devoted to PlayStation-related cameos, which was a bummer. I was hoping they'd leave the bulk of that to Playroom. I'll have more to say on Astro Bot in a full review later on. Link to that will eventually be in the description, but for now, it is truly refreshing to have a great 3D platformer that was not designed by Nintendo. Alan Wake 2. He's a writer. What a fantastic practice in narrative and game design. Not since, well, Control, have I played a game that is attempting to merge such wildly different modes of entertainment this flawlessly. Playing the game is pretty good. Despite being a very big coward, I enjoyed the tension of shining the light at take-inner shadows, then shooting at them. Although for me it was easily the weakest aspect. The gameplay is much more interesting with Alan's writing board and Saga's mind to place. Warping the world with words was really cool, and solving puzzles with the help of Saga's mental organization was a great way to see the whole picture. But, as I mentioned earlier, where the game shines is along the edges. It's when I stumble upon an aging radio host having trouble differentiating fact from fiction. It's when I find a TV broadcasting the best bad local commercials. It's solving an old nursery rhyme by placing dolls and watching the world change. It's hearing fantastic narration by the late James McCaffrey while looking out over fake New York. It's being in the starring role of a musical. It's watching a fully live-action short film starring the director of the game playing a fake character based on a real person from the game's universe based on a character from Remedy's first hit. Each of these back up an equally excellent narrative of Saga trying to fix the world, of Alan trying to escape it, and with fun ties to Remedy's other titles, I am gripped, which isn't even mentioning the 2 amazing DLCs. I absolutely loved Night Springs. Unfortunately, the Jesse Faden episode was the weakest of the 3, but even then it still was an exemplary example of what made Alan Wake 2 immaculate. Fun puzzles, interesting characters, and a story that is just weird enough to be both funny and wildly fascinating. The Rose episode was hilarious. The color palette was amazing, the story was just the right level of AO3-esque self-aware cringe, and both Jessica Preddy and Matthew Peretta's performances as Rose and the writer's evil twin were brilliant. Just the image of Rose in her diner garb, drenched in blood, is worth the price of admission alone. And somehow the Time Breaker episode is even better. I liked Tim in the base game, but I couldn't say I was excited about his standalone adventure, and then the game gave me a patently absurd romp through an actual video game filming studio, to an Alan Wake level, to a comic book, to a couple of old school games that I don't want to spoil. My jaw is dropping even thinking about it. And the fact that each of these episodes all tie in narratively to the true end of Alan Wake 2's final cut was another bonus for sickos like me. By contrast, the Lake House was just pretty good. I loved what they did with the story. It is making some clever commentary on what is art and on this latest wave of LLM technologies. The one big FMV was fun, and I enjoyed exploring another FBC facility and reading all the fantastic redacted documents within, but the puzzles were a bit on the weaker side. Regardless, as a whole package, Alan Wake 2 is so much of what I love to see in video games. I love when developers try something, and it's not often that AAA development studios get to throw things this far afield. And I've fallen so far into not only the main story it's telling, but the meta-textual one as well. I cannot get enough of this writer or this universe. Also, Herald of Darkness is a great song. Thank you so much for watching. I don't know where the game industry as a whole is going to go in 2025. I don't know where the world is going to go in 2025, but hopefully it'll all swing back sooner than later. What were your favorite games you played in 2024? Let me know either in the comments or across the internet, where you can find me at Mario8 everywhere. Links to them in the description, plus all the videos I mentioned, and also that Layoff Tracker, or my top 10 games of all the games I played at either Backlogged or GGAv.io. You can follow me, like, or subscribe at your own discretion. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.